In the heart of a bustling capital, a president watches the machines. Massive printing presses capable of creating billions in his nation's own currency with the push of a button. Yet his finance minister is on the phone begging international investors for US dollars. Dollars this country cannot print, dollars that come with strings attached. Why? Why does any sovereign nation with its own central bank and its own money choose to borrow in a currency it doesn't control? This isn't a mistake. It's the hidden architecture of global power. And understanding it reveals why some nations stay trapped while others write the rules. Right now, this system matters more than ever. Global debt has surged past $340 trillion. Most countries don't owe this money in their own currency, they owe it in someone else's. When the US Federal Reserve adjusts interest rates to manage American inflation, entire economies on the other side of the world can collapse. We've seen it happen. In 2022, Sri Lanka didn't just face a political crisis. It faced a dollar crisis. Foreign reserves evaporated, fuel ran out, people waited in lines for days for gas and medicine. The president eventually fled the country by helicopter as protests engulfed the capital. Argentina has restructured its debt 9 times since independence. 9 times. They've become the poster child for what happens when this trap snaps shut. And today, as interest rates fluctuate and geopolitical tensions rise, dozens more nations sit on the edge of similar precipices. So how did we build a world where most countries cannot borrow in the money they print? Let's trace the mechanics. Imagine you're the leader of an emerging economy. You want to build a new port, a power plant, or simply fund your government's operations. Your own citizens don't have enough savings to lend you the money at reasonable rates. So you turn to international markets. International investors, pension funds in New York, banks in London, sovereign wealth funds in the Gulf, they have dollars. They want their money back in dollars. Why? Because the dollar is the world's reserve currency. It's what they use to buy oil, technology, and other imports. It's what they trust won't lose value overnight through hyperinflation. Your local currency, it has a track record, maybe high inflation in the past, political instability, or simply no deep liquid market where investors can easily trade it. Economists call this original sin, not a moral failing but a structural one. Coined by researchers Barry Eichengreen and Ricardo Hausmann, it describes how almost every country except the United States, Japan, the UK, Switzerland, and those in the Eurozone cannot borrow abroad in their own currency. The result, you issue bonds promising repayment in US dollars. You take the money, convert it to your local currency to pay local workers and buy local materials. But the debt remains in dollars. Here's where the quiet danger builds. Your government collects taxes in the local currency. Your economy generates revenue in the local currency, but your obligations are in dollars. Now imagine your currency weakens. Maybe due to a global commodity shock or political uncertainty, or simply because investors are pulling money out to chase higher returns in America. Suddenly, those dollar payments require far more of your local money to buy the necessary dollars. The debt burden explodes without you borrowing another cent. It's financial Sudoku with live ammunition. This isn't theoretical. When the Fed raised rates aggressively a few years ago to combat American inflation, borrowing costs for emerging markets spiked. Currencies tumbled, dollar debt became crushing, the system creates a perfect asymmetry. The United States can print dollars to manage its debts, at least in theory. Other nations cannot. The dollar's special status gives America what French economist Valéry Giscard d'Estaing once called the exorbitant privilege. America can run massive trade deficits and finance them by issuing debt in its own currency. The world needs dollars, so the world buys US treasuries. For everyone else, it's the opposite. Borrowing in dollars means constantly worrying about exchange rates. It means your central bank must hoard dollar reserves instead of investing in your own development. It means when crisis hits, you often end up at the door of the International Monetary Fund, which typically demands austerity measures, privatization, and policies that can spark domestic unrest. The public story is always about development. Borrow today to build tomorrow. Growth will outpace the interest. Development banks and finance ministers repeat this like a mantra. The underlying reality is more uncomfortable. This system transfers risk from lenders to borrowers in the most profound way. Lenders get paid in the currency they trust. Borrowers bear the full force of currency volatility. It also creates strange incentives. Governments sometimes deliberately keep their currencies weak or manipulate statistics to attract more dollar inflows. Others get trapped in cycles of borrowing new dollars to pay old dollar debts, the classic Ponzi-like dynamic of international finance. Over decades, this has shaped global economic power in subtle but decisive ways. It explains why currency crises seem to strike the same countries repeatedly. Why commodity exporters get punished twice, once when prices fall and again when their currency crashes and dollar debts balloon. It reveals why some nations push so hard for alternatives. Why BRICS nations talk about new payment systems. Why China promotes the yuan for trade settlement. Why some leaders flirt with Bitcoin or gold as alternatives. But the dollar's network effects are incredibly sticky. Everyone uses it because everyone else uses it. Oil is priced in it, commodities trade in it, global banks clear payments through it. Changing this system isn't like flipping a switch. It's like trying to change the operating system of the entire global economy while it's still running. The uncomfortable math is this. For most nations, true monetary sovereignty remains an illusion. They have their own flags, their own anthems, their own presidents. But when it comes to capital, they operate within constraints written in Washington and on Wall Street. This isn't conspiracy. It's emergent order from decades of history, path dependency, and simple economics. The countries that won World War II designed institutions that reflected their power. The dollar was at the center of Bretton Woods. When that system broke in 1971, the dollar didn't lose its throne. It evolved. Today we see the tensions building. Geopolitical conflicts are increasingly fought through financial channels. Sanctions cut countries off from dollar systems. The weaponization of finance makes more nations nervous about depending so heavily on one currency. Yet the alternatives remain immature. The euro has its own problems. The yuan comes with Beijing's political strings. No other currency offers the same combination of deep markets, rule of law, and political stability that the dollar provides. So nations keep borrowing in dollars they cannot print. They keep accumulating reserves they could better use at home. They keep dancing to the rhythm of Federal Reserve policy. The system is remarkably resilient, but resilience isn't the same as fairness, and it certainly isn't the same as permanence. The real question isn't why nations borrow in dollars they can't print. It's what happens when enough of them decide they won't anymore. Or when the next major shock proves that this particular emperor has, in fact, been wearing very expensive clothes.